Police stormed a cafe in Sydney where a gunman had been holding hostages for over 16 hours. All authorities are saying the situation is now officially over, and there are reports that 2 people have been killed. One of those 2, the gunman. So let's take you back to Sydney, Australia, with our Bloomberg reporter, Paul Allen. Paul, give us the latest.
Good morning. Yes, those reports are unconfirmed. The fate of the gunman is still unknown, and it's reported, as you mentioned, one other person may be dead. Ambulances are now on the scene, and ambulance crews are now inside the Lindt Cafe. So the siege is definitely over. Police are saying that it's over, but the timeline to get us here was a dramatic one over the past hour or so. A little after 2 a.m. local time, a male hostage ran out. A few moments later, 2 more groups of hostages ran out of that Lindt Cafe. And then at 2:15 local time, shots were fired. And at that point, police acted. They threw flash grenades, multiple shots were fired. They were seen entering the building, and moments later, it was announced that the siege was over. We do have the identification of the gunman now. He's a 50-year-old self-proclaimed cleric called Mon Haron Monis. The media did know of his identification earlier in the day, but agreed to police requests to keep that quiet. He's Iranian, which is curious because Iran is, of course, no friend of the Islamic State, and he didn't have an Islamic State flag during the siege, but a Shahada flag, which had a slogan on it, there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. But Mr. Monis was known to the police. He had previously written offensive letters to the families of dead Australian soldiers. So he was the gunman, but his fate at this stage is unconfirmed. Back to you.
Paul, is it at all unusual that the New South Wales police haven't released a statement or held some kind of a news conference? Different police forces handle affairs in different ways. It's just a question I think some people may have at the moment.
I would say that a statement and a press conference will be coming from the New South Wales Police. We've had press conferences throughout the day from both the Police Commissioner, Andrew Scipione, and more frequently the Deputy Commissioner, who has been down there at the scene. So the police have certainly had plenty of communications with the media, but just been very, very circumspect about what they say when they do have those communications. And they've also been courting the media very actively during all of this, asking for the cooperation, asking that media reports be very cautious, and that does appear to have happened. But I would expect to hear something from the police very, very soon.
All right, Paul, thank you so much for giving us the latest. That's Bloomberg News' Paul Allen joining us from Sydney, Australia.
We also have David Gartenstein-Ross. He is a senior fellow and counterterrorism expert at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. David, you've been following this situation from afar, as have we. What conclusions have you been able to draw thus far?
Well, it's a little bit difficult to get solid conclusions at this early point. There's a lot of things about this hostage taker that are interesting. As the previous guest mentioned, Man Haron Monis is from Iran. In addition to the fact that Iran is a predominantly Shia country, in recent years he's been filmed with a turban that's reminiscent not of Sunnis, but rather of Shia clerics. So, and he also has this kind of interesting and, from a Salafi perspective, a heretical background, where he proclaims himself to be an expert in astrology, numerology, black magic, things like that, which are seen as complete no-go areas by those who are committed to ISIS's worldview. He did, however, when he held hostages, not only hold up the Shahada flag, but also actually issue a demand that someone bring him an ISIS flag, according to the Australian media. So there's a lot to be said here. I have my early guesses, but I think we'll know much more about this guy within 24 to 48 hours.
Well, what are your early guesses?
Well, again, early guesses are worth as much as a guess, but something that strikes me is that he may be much rather than specifically devoted to ISIS's ideology. It's possible that he is more interested in a pan-Islamic and B, an anti-West worldview, rather than being specifically inculcated into the kind of Salafi jihadist ideology that's emblematic of ISIS or Al-Qaeda.
David, would you draw a parallel between this situation and what we saw unfold about, I think it was 6 or 7 weeks ago on Parliament Hill in Ottawa, where you had a lone gunman shooting a member of a soldier, effectively, who was guarding a war memorial?
Well, symbolically, yes. I mean, a few things that are significant about this is you had that rash of attacks. I mean, you had one in Canada the previous day, then you had a New York City attack. All of them appeared to have been in some way inspired by ISIS. Those 3 attacks that came on the same week. And it's, lone wolf attackers are not that common. ISIS seems to have a very strong record of success in bringing out lone wolf attackers or inspiring them in some way. I think part of that is their innovative and ahead-of-the-curve use of the Internet, which can serve as a mechanism through social media and the like to prompt people to action. One reason we see so few lone wolf terrorists in general is because usually it's a group that brings someone to carry out something like a violent act. It's more difficult to get a single person to self-motivate. One other thing I should say, by the way, you asked about my early impressions. I think there's a decent chance, kind of like many lone wolf attackers, that this man Harun Monis, may be mentally ill. He has a very erratic past, including charges of sexual harassment, sexual assault. He'd been in trouble with the law before. But as I said, early guesses are really just early guesses. We'll know much more that's concrete very soon.
Now, one quick question. You're an expert in counterterrorism. What approach, if any, should have governments in Australia, for example, New South Wales in this case, or in the earlier example, Canada, the province of Ontario, the federal government in Ottawa, have taken, because in both circumstances, the individual was previously known to authorities?
Lone wolf attacks are very difficult to stop. Even if somebody is known to authorities, if they haven't broken the law, there's not a whole lot you can do about them. In this case, Harun had actually been in some trouble with the law, so they may have been able to use the immigration system to get him out of the country sooner. There are some ways that they could have intervened, but inherently this is actually a very difficult type of attacker to prevent. The flip side is that lone wolf attackers in general are able to do far less damage than groups. The average lone wolf attacker kills about 0.6 people in the course of an attack, whereas the amount killed by groups is over 1. So the lethality is much less, which is the upside of them being difficult to stop.